Imagine waking up, rushing to check your emails before breakfast, skimming through dozens of messages, bouncing between notifications, and then sitting down at a desk where the next 8 hours are broken up by meetings, urgent to-dos, and constant multitasking. By the end of the day, you've worked non-stop, but you can't quite put your finger on what you truly created or thought deeply about. This is the rhythm of modern work: fast, fragmented, and often shallow. In today's world, we like to think of ourselves as knowledge workers. People paid to think critically, solve problems, and innovate. Yet the environments we work in rarely allow for that. Instead of nurturing deep, focused thinking, modern workplaces push us towards surface-level productivity, quick responses, endless multitasking, and the appearance of being busy. Over time, this shift transforms sharp, creative minds into shallow versions of themselves, unable to focus deeply or reflect meaningfully. This video explores how modern work culture, with its obsession over speed, measurement, and constant connectivity, strips away our ability to think deeply. We'll look at the history of work, how technology and culture have reshaped attention, and the psychological costs of living in this state of perpetual distraction. More importantly, we'll explore whether there's a way back, a path to reclaiming our deep, thoughtful selves in a shallow world. 1. Historical context, from craft to fragmentation. To understand why modern work erodes deep thinking, we first need to look at how work has evolved over time. Before the Industrial Revolution, most people engaged in forms of labor that required sustained concentration and skill. Farmers, artisans, and craftspeople often worked with a clear rhythm. Long hours, yes, but often marked by periods of slow, focused effort. A blacksmith shaping iron or a farmer tending crops couldn't multitask endlessly. Their work demanded presence, attention, and patience. The results of their labor were tangible and meaningful, directly tied to the time and care they invested. The Industrial Revolution marked a profound shift. Factories introduced assembly line labor, breaking down work into repetitive, fragmented tasks. Workers were no longer expected to bring their full creativity or concentration to a single project. Instead, they performed narrow functions in a larger system of efficiency. This was the birth of work as a series of shallow fragments, a structure that valued speed and quantity over depth and quality. While this system drove massive economic growth, it also planted the seeds for the way modern work treats human attention, as a resource to be endlessly divided, rather than focused. Fast forward to today, and the legacy of fragmented labor still shapes our workplaces. Even though many of us are no longer factory workers, the same principles apply. Corporate environments break projects into metrics, tasks, and deliverables, often leaving little space for slow, thoughtful engagement. In other words, even though we've left the assembly line behind, our minds are still trapped in its logic, working in pieces, chasing speed, and rarely given the freedom to engage deeply with complex problems. 2. The culture of speed. One of the defining features of modern work is speed. We live in an always-on culture where fast responses, instant communication, and quick decisions are not just valued but expected. Tools like Slack, Microsoft Teams, and email create an environment where workers are never truly disconnected. The pressure to respond quickly creates the illusion of productivity. It feels good to hit send on a fast reply or check off a small task, But, in reality, this culture chips away at our ability to engage with complex, meaningful work. Speed also encourages surface-level engagement. When you're bombarded with messages, updates, and shifting priorities, the only way to keep up is to skim. Reading becomes scanning, thinking becomes reacting, and conversations turn into quick exchanges rather than thoughtful dialogues. The workplace becomes a race where the fastest, not the most insightful, are rewarded. This creates a dangerous cycle. The more we equate speed with productivity, the less space we leave for slow, reflective thinking. The long-term effect of this culture of speed is intellectual shallowness. Workers who might once have had the capacity for sustained problem-solving or creative breakthroughs now spend their energy keeping up with an endless stream of interruptions. Deep thought is replaced with constant reaction, leaving individuals mentally exhausted, but not intellectually fulfilled. Over time, this undermines not just productivity but also creativity and human flourishing. 3. The tyranny of metrics. Alongside the obsession with speed is the rise of metrics, the quantification of every aspect of work. In most modern workplaces, success is measured by key performance indicators, KPIs, output numbers, or time tracking tools. While measurement can be useful, it has also created what we might call the tyranny of metrics. When workers know they are judged by the number of tasks completed, hours logged, or emails sent, the focus shifts away from meaningful contributions to measurable, shallow outputs. This obsession with measurement encourages employees to prioritize what is countable over what is valuable. A software engineer might fix 10 minor bugs instead of solving one complex design flaw because the smaller tasks are easier to measure and reward. A teacher might teach to the test instead of inspiring curiosity because standardized scores are the metric of success. In each case, the pressure to satisfy the numbers diminishes the depth and richness of the work. Metrics also create psychological stress. When workers are constantly evaluated, they internalize the idea that their worth is tied to output. Instead of asking, "What can I learn? How can I grow? How can I create something meaningful?" they ask, "What will make me look productive?" This mindset produces shallow engagement with tasks, a fear of failure, and a tendency to avoid risk, all of which shrink the human mind to a fraction of its potential. 4. The disappearance of solitude and reflection. One of the most damaging losses in modern work is the disappearance of solitude. Deep thinking requires uninterrupted stretches of time, hours, sometimes days, where the mind can wrestle with ideas, explore possibilities, and arrive at original insights. Yet in the modern workplace, solitude is rare. Open office layouts, constant meetings, and digital notifications ensure that workers are almost never alone with their thoughts. The result is an environment that prioritizes constant connection over reflection. This absence of solitude has a direct impact on creativity. History is filled with examples of breakthroughs that emerged from long periods of quiet concentration. Writers retreating into isolation to craft novels, scientists working through problems in solitude, and philosophers spending years developing their theories. In contrast, today's employees rarely have the luxury of uninterrupted time. They are expected to be reachable, responsive, and visible at all times, which prevents the sustained immersion required for meaningful breakthroughs. Even outside the office, solitude is vanishing. Smartphones and digital platforms have extended the workplace into evenings and weekends, meaning that the rare moments when individuals could once reflect during a commute, while walking, or even in silence at home, are now filled with scrolling, messaging, and endless distractions. Without solitude, reflection becomes a luxury instead of a necessity, and without reflection, the deep parts of our minds remain underused, leaving us intellectually shallow and emotionally drained. 5. Psychological consequences. The shallow structure of modern work doesn't just affect productivity, it has profound psychological consequences. One of the most visible effects is anxiety. The constant pressure to be on creates a sense of urgency that never subsides. Workers live in a state of hyper-alertness, always anticipating the next email, meeting, or request. Over time, this erodes mental health, replacing confidence and calm with stress and fatigue. Burnout is another byproduct of shallow work environments. Because workers are rewarded for visible activity rather than meaningful outcomes, they push themselves to do more and more, often without feeling that their work has purpose. This leads to exhaustion not just of the body, but of the spirit. People describe feeling like cogs in a machine, busy but unfulfilled, active but empty. The human need for meaningful engagement is replaced with an endless cycle of tasks that feel both urgent and meaningless. Finally, the erosion of deep work diminishes self-identity. Many people define themselves by their work, but when that work becomes shallow, it's difficult to find pride in it. Instead of saying, "I built something important" or "I solved a difficult problem," workers are left with the hollow satisfaction of having answered emails or hit arbitrary targets. This hollowness eats away at motivation and leaves individuals disconnected, not only from their jobs, but from their own sense of purpose. 6. Technology's role. If there is one force that has accelerated the shallowness of modern work more than any other, it is technology. Digital tools have made communication instantaneous, but they have also fragmented our attention. A worker might open their laptop with the intention of focusing on a report, only to be pulled away by Slack notifications, email alerts, or the temptation of social media. The very tools that were meant to make us more efficient often scatter our concentration into dozens of micro-moments. The problem lies not just in the presence of these tools, but in the way they are designed. Most platforms are built to maximize engagement, not depth. Social media thrives on short bursts of attention, likes, shares, comments. And this design philosophy has leaked into workplace tools as well. Instead of fostering deep collaboration, they encourage rapid-fire exchanges, creating a culture of constant distraction. In this environment, sustained focus feels almost unnatural, as if we are going against the grain of the digital systems we rely on. Technology also blurs the boundaries between work and life. Remote work, flexible schedules, and smartphones have given us the freedom to work from anywhere, but that freedom comes with a cost: the inability to ever truly unplug. Work creeps into evenings, weekends, and even vacations, leaving little room for mental recovery. This constant connectivity reinforces shallow engagement as workers spread their energy thin across endless pings, messages, and updates. Instead of technology being a tool for human growth, it often becomes a trap that reduces our capacity for deep thought. 7. The decline of deep work. The cumulative effect of speed, metrics, lack of solitude, and technology is the decline of what author Cal Newport calls deep work. Deep work is the ability to focus without distraction on cognitively demanding tasks, the kind of work that produces breakthroughs, innovation, and lasting value. Modern workplaces, however, often do the opposite. They create conditions where shallow work dominates and deep work is rare. This decline is not accidental. Most organizations are structured to reward visibility rather than results. The employee who attends every meeting, responds instantly to emails, and appears constantly busy is often praised, while the one who quietly spends hours wrestling with a difficult problem may be overlooked. In this way, shallow work becomes institutionalized, built into performance reviews, office culture, and even job descriptions. Deep work, which requires time and space, becomes almost impossible to justify in a culture obsessed with immediacy. The tragedy of this decline is that it limits human potential. History shows us that progress comes from individuals and teams who are able to think deeply, to spend weeks, months, or years on a single question until they discover something new. But when modern work environments strip away the conditions necessary for this kind of thinking, they also strip away the possibility of true innovation. What we gain in speed, we lose in depth, and the result is a society that produces more noise but fewer breakthroughs. 8. Case studies and examples. To see how modern work reduces deep minds into shallow versions of themselves, we don't need to look far. Consider Silicon Valley, often hailed as the epicenter of innovation. Tech companies pride themselves on creating environments filled with beanbags, snack bars, and endless collaboration. Yet behind the colorful walls, many workers report being overwhelmed by meetings, sprint cycles, and constant communication. Engineers and designers who might otherwise spend hours building revolutionary tools often find themselves bogged down in Jira tickets, Slack threads, and fragmented tasks. The pressure to release quickly, to iterate endlessly, and to meet quarterly goals often overrides the pursuit of depth. Academia offers another revealing case. In theory, universities should be sanctuaries for deep thinking, where scholars have the freedom to pursue knowledge without distraction. But the reality is increasingly different. Professors are judged by the number of papers they publish rather than the depth of their contributions. This publish or perish culture encourages shallow work. Shorter, more frequent papers that keep up with metrics, rather than long-term research that requires years of solitude and deep inquiry. What was once a haven for intellectual depth has become another victim of the tyranny of speed and measurement. Even creative industries are not immune. Writers, musicians, and filmmakers now face pressure to produce content at the pace of social media, rather than cultivate meaningful art over time. Algorithms reward consistency and volume, not originality or depth. As a result, creators often dilute their vision to keep up with the relentless demands of visibility. The very fields that should champion depth and creativity are reshaped by the shallow logic of modern work. 9. The human cost. Behind all the theories and structures lies a very real human cost. The first casualty is creativity. When workers are forced into shallow engagement, their ability to imagine, explore, and innovate shrinks. A mind constantly interrupted cannot wander. And wandering is often where the seeds of creativity are planted. Without that freedom, workers become reactive rather than generative. They respond to problems but rarely create solutions that change the game. The second cost is purpose. Human beings crave meaning in their work. We want to feel that our efforts matter, that they contribute to something larger than ourselves. But shallow work often strips away this sense of meaning. Answering emails or hitting performance metrics may keep the machine running, but it rarely gives individuals a sense of pride. Over time, this creates a quiet despair, a sense that one's life is being spent on tasks that don't truly matter. Finally, the human cost is psychological depletion. Burnout, anxiety, and depression are not just side effects of modern work, they are symptoms of a deeper problem. The neglect of our need for depth, focus, and purpose. When work denies us the chance to use our minds fully, it doesn't just limit our professional growth, it starves a part of our humanity. This cost may be invisible in spreadsheets and quarterly reports, but it is profoundly felt in the lives of individuals and communities. 10. Paths forward. If modern work has made us shallow, the question becomes, how do we reclaim our depth? The answer lies in both individual choices and systemic changes. On a personal level, workers can begin by protecting their attention. This means carving out time for deep work, scheduling hours without distractions, turning off notifications, and resisting the temptation to constantly check messages. Even small acts of reclaiming focus can reawaken the capacity for depth. A single uninterrupted hour of concentration can accomplish more than a whole day of fragmented multitasking. But individuals cannot shoulder the burden alone. Organizations must also recognize the value of depth. Companies that want true innovation need to move beyond the culture of speed and metrics. This might mean redesigning the workday to include protected time for focused effort, limiting unnecessary meetings, or shifting evaluation away from sheer output toward meaningful results. Some forward-thinking organizations have already begun experimenting with focus days where meetings are banned, or with shorter work weeks that allow employees to recover and return with renewed clarity. Beyond workplaces, society as a whole must reimagine its relationship with work. If we continue to equate productivity with busyness, we will keep producing shallow outputs at the expense of genuine progress. But if we embrace depth, in schools, in workplaces, and in our personal lives, we can foster an environment where the human mind is allowed to flourish. The path forward is not to abandon modern tools or progress, but to use them wisely, creating space for the kind of deep, reflective thinking that defines our humanity. Conclusion: modern work, in its obsession with speed, metrics, and constant connectivity, has quietly transformed the way we think. Instead of nurturing our deepest abilities, it has fractured our attention, eroded our creativity, and left us feeling busy but unfulfilled. What was once the promise of knowledge work, a chance to think, innovate, and create, has too often devolved into shallow tasks that exhaust us without inspiring us. Yet this story does not have to end in despair. The very fact that we can name the problem means we can begin to solve it. By reclaiming solitude, slowing down, and redefining what it means to be productive, we can resist the shallow logic of modern work. Individuals, organizations, and entire cultures can make choices that honor depth over distraction, meaning over metrics, and creativity over constant activity. If we do, we may rediscover what makes work truly human, the ability to bring our full minds, not just fragments of them, to the challenges before us. In a world that rewards shallowness, choosing depth is a radical act, one that could not only restore our own sense of purpose but also open the door to breakthroughs and innovations that only deep thinking can bring.